Thank you guys for coming tonight. I'm Joelly. I'm a part of the marketing team here at Edge. Before we start, with the questions and the free-flowing conversation, I wanted I wanted each of you to take the time to maybe give a brief, overview of what you're currently working on. Of course, we're all women in crypto, but would love to know what you guys are currently working on right now. So first, we'll start off with Hailey.
Yeah, I guess, Can you all hear me? I'm Hailey. I'm an attorney in the space. I've been working in the crypto space since about 2013. I'm currently at Anderson Kill, which is a law firm. We have a specialized practice dealing with all things cryptocurrency, blockchain, and dealing with a lot of the more recent enforcement actions, all the regulatory stuff we might touch on today. But last year I also created an organization called Crypto Connect, which is, we launched with 12 chapters. Wendy's actually helps lead off the Los Angeles chapter and have expanded to 20 other chapters. And so our goal with that is networking opportunities, mentorship for everybody. It's not just a women-only organization, but it's female-led. And so yeah, that's me.
Thank you. My name is Sieckmann. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm a writer, director, producer, and a former professional athlete. I'm currently working on a pretty large-scale Bitcoin documentary, which I'll probably touch on later, so I won't say too much about it right now.
Hi, I'm Natalie Brunell. I host a podcast called Coin Stories, where I talk about Bitcoin and the economy. And I also host a new show called Hard Money, which basically is a Bitcoin version of CNBC, which I'm really excited about. And I also am super grateful I get to travel and educate people about Bitcoin.
So I go by Wendy or Crypto Wendy. I have a teeny tiny YouTube channel, and we talk about crypto. Self-sovereignty, Bitcoin, Web3, NFTs, metaverse, you name it. We talk about it. We do trading. Yes, I'm a girl and I do trade. How cool is that, right? We also have a free newsletter. Newsletter is absolutely outstanding. It's self-funded by me. You guys should really, really subscribe to it. My writers are absolutely amazing. I do TikTok. I do Instagram. I kind of troll on Twitter a little bit, but we really just kind of focus on providing, easy to access education and breaking these really complex terms down for everybody, for your average Joe. Because I think that's a big problem we have in the space is we get all these really smart tech savvy people, and they forget that there's a whole world of people that aren't tech savvy. So that's a little bit what I do.
Awesome, thank you. I don't have those nice, clip-ons right now, so I forgot to turn this on. But okay, well, now we're gonna get into the question portion of the conversation. Feel free, as I ask everyone a question, feel free to chime in if you want to. So, it's a free-flowing convo. Okay, Hailey, so you actually started your career here in San Diego, actually at Silvergate Bank, which is awesome. Good to have you back in San Diego.
Yeah,
could you tell us a little bit about your time as a lawyer in the space and where you see regulation headed? I know that's a big question, especially with everything going on.
Yeah, so I did start my career here. So Silvergate Bank's in La Jolla. They were one of the first banks to get into the crypto space. And when I joined, before that, I was with a company called $X that did wholesale currency exchange along the San Diego and Mexico border. And from my time there, I was just kind of horrified to see the friction that traditional finance and moving physical cash and the money laundering concerns that occur there. And then Silvergate kind of popped up and said, we're looking to bank the industry. We have already started banking Coinbase. We know why we're comfortable, but we don't really know, we haven't documented it. And so it was an incredible opportunity. It's what got my foot in the door of crypto and had this crazy bird's eye view of the entire industry because everyone was looking for bank accounts at that time. And so from there, regulation has just become such a topic of every conversation we have in crypto, which is great for job security and not so great for the industry as a whole at times. But so, I think what we've been seeing, I guess, as trends is this whole regulatory land grab between the CFTC and the SEC. Natalie and I were on Fox a few weeks ago and talked about it. And it's just crazy to me because, for anyone who knows this, sorry to repeat, but the SEC regulates cryptocurrencies using this test called the Howey test from 1946. and it's this really old law that's supposed to, determine what is a security and what's not. And we've just seen for years and years the SEC just keep regulating through like enforcement actions, and Hester Peirce will propose a safe harbor that could like maybe help innovation, and then the rest of the SEC commissioners don't really acknowledge it. And so we're still seeing that battle of the CFTC wants to regulate more cryptocurrency projects. The SEC keeps regulating through enforcement actions, and if they actually start to regulate like proactively, that might mean a ton of projects and like exchanges in the space have to register with the SEC, and a ton of money going to those sort of efforts. So that's one thing I've definitely noticed over the years. And then just sort of the ways in which regulators are still grappling with how to like define things. So maybe at some point today we'll talk about what's happened with like tornado cash last week and things like that, or earlier this week. But it's just crazy because regulators are like trying to figure out how do you regulate these things that happen in the space, and some of these things with like Celsius that are really causing issues, but because crypto doesn't fit into these already delineated laws, when they try to regulate it, it usually causes a mess instead of actually protecting consumers. So those are like the two biggest trends I'm seeing, is lack of consumer protection, even though that's what regulators are supposed to do.
Right. I think I recently saw a tweet that you sent out, I think today or maybe yesterday, where you said, "Don't hate the lawyers, hate the law."
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah. I wrote a Forbes article about the tornado cash aspect, and OFAC under the Treasury is who created sort of the mess with tornado cash, and OFAC strict liability, which means if someone does violate it and they're a U.S. citizen or based in the U.S. or have ties to the U.S. in some ways, they might be found responsible for an OFAC violation. And strict liability means it doesn't matter what your intentions are, it doesn't matter what your knowledge was, like you can be found liable. And so I felt like I was sort of saying some of these facts, and sometimes just saying that is sort of like comes off as an unpopular opinion, because people are like, screw the government, screw all that. It's like, well, I know, like maybe I agree kind of, but like, it's still the world we're operating in, so it's hard.
Okay, then we'll go on to Lauren. Lauren, can you tell us a bit about your project? I know you mentioned it briefly, but we're all curious.
So I can't say too much about the title and what the contents of it are, but I can kind of share a bit about how it came about, and the process has been really fascinating. So I got introduced to Bitcoin in 2019 from my dad. So my dad's in his 60s. And he approached it. I was in this period of time where I was a professional athlete and I was transitioning into film. I actually went back to Nebraska, where I'm from, for a couple of years because I had some health problems and some injuries. So I spent 2 years really figuring out how I was going to make this transition. And my dad, the first thing he said to me when I got back was, "You should write a script about Bitcoin." And my first response was, "That sounds really boring. I don't know how you could write a film about Bitcoin." And I didn't know what it was, but he explained to me why he got into it. And he had lived through the long-term capital management crisis and the subprime crisis in 2008. So he started seeing a pattern, with our financial system, and got into Bitcoin pretty early as a result of that. So that's what inspired me. So back in 2019, when I started kind of falling down that rabbit hole, I was like, wow, I love film, I love Bitcoin. How can I combine these two things? So I just researched. I got on Twitter, and I didn't tweet anything for the longest time, but I had like 2 followers. They were my parents, and I sat there and I watched everything. And eventually I started speaking out when I felt like I had enough education, which I don't think anybody is an expert in this field. I think we're all still learning, even the top speakers in this. So what I ended up doing was I created an idea for a Bitcoin documentary based on my experience getting into Bitcoin and what hooked me. So that was learning about money. I studied business in college and economics. I studied macro, micro, and I didn't get money until I got into Bitcoin. And I thought that was what sold me on this was, I think we use money every single day, and most people in the world don't understand how it really works. And I think that's what people need to understand to really understand Bitcoin, crypto, and also where Bitcoin fits into that, what the utility is, why it's different, how it can help everybody beyond this, this stigma we have of Bitcoin, get rich quick. That's not it at all, but that's what people don't get because they don't get money. So created this idea. I ended up, just networking, going to a bunch of conferences, ended up getting a first investor. And it took me a very long time, but I first raised some initial capital. And from there was able to go and find a good film partner who I've been working with, and he's incredible. And he's Oscar nominated, Emmy nominated. I mean, he's fantastic. So we ended up partnering, and then from there we raised $2 million. So long process, but I'm really excited about it. And it's my first big film. So I went from having all these health problems, which I resolved. But I was starting at scratch, and I have this big film that I'm really passionate about. So I'm really excited. We'll probably start sharing something publicly, maybe in December. And then it should be out around next year in April, but times change, so we don't know. It's always changing, but really excited for when I can share more about it. But it's been really cool.
Awesome. Well, we'll be following you on Twitter. You'll have how many people are here? You'll have all these new people. So you mentioned that you were really into film. Were you a writer before? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So I studied acting for about 2 years. I didn't really audition. I just was really studying, so I really didn't have any experience. I had studied, I read books how to write. I wrote, everything. I really just studied, but this is my first big credit. It's really was just taking 2 years to sit back and learn. And I wrote a couple other scripts. So actually, I first started writing a full-length feature film. So I wrote a story about Bitcoin. It was part fictional, part true. And I had a hard time getting anybody interested in it. I didn't have many contacts in Hollywood, in the film industry. And so eventually I was like, Bitcoin documentary. People need to understand Bitcoin first before they understand why the screenplay could be of value. So that's kind of how it came about. But I do still have this screenplay sitting on my computer about Bitcoin. So I hope one day to get that one made as well into a film. But yeah, I've really just self-taught as of recently, the past couple of years.
Hello. Okay, we're good. Tess, that's so inspiring. I'm going to now ask Natalie a question. So you're a first-generation immigrant whose family taught you about hard money because they grew up in communism before coming to the U.S. and trying to find the American dream. My question is, how can Bitcoin help the American dream grow and be more achievable?
Yeah, I think that we need to have a renaissance for the American dream because my family came here. You're right, they grew up in communism, Eastern Europe. My mom was a gold bug. My family they were gold bugs. But they always just they put so much importance into the idea of individualism, freedom, sovereignty. And I've recently orange pilled them. Unfortunately, it was when it was very high, but but no, they came here, and I think what was sad for me to witness is two people who worked really, really hard. My mom was 38 when we came from Poland. My dad was 41, and they started from scratch. They didn't know the language, and they just worked hard. They never asked for handouts. They never asked for assistance. They would work multiple jobs, and just as they had finally kind of made it and they were able to afford a mortgage, that was right before the great financial crisis. And so I went off to college thinking, oh wow, my family finally made it. We were able to afford a nice little townhouse outside of Chicago. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call. They lost everything in that. And I just kind of wondered, well, how could that happen? Like, how could that happen in the country that represents capitalism and, the American dream and the middle class and anyone who works hard can achieve what they want and make a better life for their family. So I entered into my career kind of thinking, what is wrong? Like, how did that happen? And I didn't know because I didn't understand money, because financial literacy in this country is so lacking that really it was because of this broken monetary system that my parents unknowingly kind of walked into, and they had saved in the wrong way. They didn't have assets. They were saving in the way that a lot of immigrants save, which is just putting money in the bank or trying to save up for a home. So I think that when I discovered Bitcoin, I realized that that's the one thing that can level the playing field again and can make the system more fair. We're never going to have we're not going to avoid having wealth inequality because some people work harder than others. Some people have different, talents and and value that they want to put forth. But at the same time, I think that everything feels really rigged because it is. The money system is manipulated, so people at the top have an advantage and everyone else is working harder and harder for money that's worth less and less. And that treadmill gets really difficult. So now I think for my generation, millennials, so many of my peers, it's like, how do you afford that first house? How do you catch up when you're already so behind and you basically grew up and came of age in one financial crisis only to hit, that period of your life where you should be able to afford a house and you're trying to start your family, and all of a sudden we're in COVID and another financial crisis hits, and it just feels like there's one crisis after another and we can never catch up. So for me, crypto is a really interesting revolution at large because I feel like it's a bunch of young people saying technology can fix these problems and we're tired of being left behind. We want a seat at the table and we're going to burn it down because we don't trust these institutions anymore. And Bitcoin is this beautiful a phoenix rising from the ashes that allows us this hope. So, more than just an American dream, I think for around the world, you can, people in El Salvador can dream and not have to feel like they have to leave to come to the US, people in Europe, people in Nigeria. I just think it allows for you to hope for the future. And to me, the American dream espouses the idea that we do have hope for the future. You can make your life better if you work hard. So I think Bitcoin, by leveling the playing field and kind of rebuilding a new economy in a parallel system, can offer that.
Awesome. In your podcast, Coin Stories, you actually touch on this as well, where you discussed how Bitcoin is lifting people out of poverty. Can you expand on how you feel Bitcoin is affecting underdeveloped communities and minorities specifically?
Yeah, so this is one of the reasons why I think it's interesting that Bitcoin's not embraced by progressives, because it's literally the definition of financial inclusion. It's banking the unbanked. It's providing people for the opportunity to accumulate wealth in a way that maybe they didn't have a chance to before. All you need is a smartphone and an internet connection, and 6 billion people around the planet have smartphones, but they don't all have access to the S&P 500 or bank accounts. So I just think that it provides so much inclusion, not just here in the US, where we do have a lot of people actually that are unbanked. And most of us, kind of, I think, forget those marginalized communities because we assume everyone in the US at least has access to that, but also around the world. Like, I traveled to El Salvador, I got to see Bitcoin adoption there. I've heard stories I went to a conference called Oslo Freedom Forum, where it was people talking about in Afghanistan how Bitcoin was being used to help refugees escape, in Ukraine, and it just all over the world, people are able to finally access a piece of technology that gives them monetary freedom. And I think that's really inspiring. And so I think that in the future here in the US, a lot of people don't want to spend their Bitcoin, which I understand, and I kind of fall into that category a little bit, because we kind of have we're already programmed to save, and how we've saved has sort of changed over the last few decades. It went from the savings account, which actually yielded something in terms of interest rates in the past, to bonds, to stocks and real estate, and now I think it's going to be Bitcoin. Whereas in the emerging countries and in the developing world, I think that Bitcoin actually serves as a better medium of exchange, especially via stablecoins as well, because they need it in real time to subvert authoritarian governments and the oppression in those regimes, and to be able to flee and not have something that can be confiscated. But I think that those worlds will collide eventually. So it's going to be a savings technology meets medium of exchange. And I mean, I'm very hopeful and bullish on what Bitcoin will eventually become.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Wendy, good to see you again. Your YouTube channel, The O Show, currently has over 100,000 subscribers. I haven't checked since maybe it has increased. 172. So yeah, I think that deserves a round of applause. What was the inspiration behind starting the show?
So that's a great question. I actually started my YouTube channel because I wanted to host meetups. When I first got into Bitcoin, crypto, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same to me. I was really into networking. I was really, really entrepreneurial. I was working this really, really terrible job in healthcare. I was servicing a really great group of people. I worked in infectious disease, servicing HIV/AIDS patients. But I had a really long commute. I was commuting 3 to 4 hours, 4 times a week. I was a brand new mom, and I had to go back to work because in the United States of America, we don't have really great care, especially for women, especially when you have a baby. So I remember I was pumping, I was nursing, I had to go back to work, I had postpartum. It was just a really, really terrible, it was a terrible feeling having to leave my baby at home and being so far from her. And I was in community college at the time, and I finally finished my stuff, and I was like, I'm gonna get into this Bitcoin stuff, because I initially heard about it in 2011. It was actually my stepson. He's like, hey, can I borrow your credit card to buy Bitcoin? I was like, you're insane. I was like, no, we're not doing this, no. So bottom line is he has really, really expensive computer parts that don't work, because he used Bitcoin for its intended purposes, digital cash. But anyways, so back in end of 2017, I was like really frustrated, and I was like, okay, I have to make a change. So I wanted to go back to college, because we're taught you have to go to college to make 6 figures to be able to take care of your family. So I was like, fine, I'll go back to college, finish my degree. So I did that, and then I bought Bitcoin. And I was like, okay, this is really, really cool. Like, I can learn how to trade, whatever it was. And I actually walked into a TD Ameritrade, and I was like, I want to learn, can I trade? Can we open up a brokerage account? They're like, yeah, we need $25,000 of your money. I was like, what? This is my savings for while I'm in school, so no, you can't have this. But with Bitcoin, I was able to trade, and I actually taught myself how to trade. It's super cool. So I decided that I wanted to network. I wanted to meet more people in this space, and I started hosting meetups. And from summer of 2018 until COVID hit, the panorama, I hosted over 4 dozen free meetups all over Southern California. I also have done, I think, in New York, Florida, all over the place. And the goal of this is to bring people together so that people can talk and learn about crypto and Bitcoin without having to pay a lot of money for tickets, because conferences at that time, you'd go to conferences and they'd show you their ICO and you'd pay like $1,000, which I thought was absolutely stupid. I was like, Bitcoin's created for the people, by the people. Why am I paying thousands of dollars to learn about your ICO? I just want to meet and network with people. So I started the channel to live stream to my global audience. And then I was like, okay, well, I know technical analysis and I'm actively trading, so let's start pushing that stuff out there. Then I started posting my content on Twitter. My account kind of grew big because I was like one of the only girls doing it. And I was like, yay, super cool. And then I started getting opportunities to do like interviews and do all kinds of really cool stuff. So that's how the channel grew. It was really to showcase the events so people could learn and network to people globally. And then it grew to me kind of feeling empowered as a human, and like, okay, I have a voice. I can do really cool stuff. I can talk about things, and I can direct it to specific communities that I think might need this a little bit more than others. And it just grew into this really cool thing. And I think we're one of the largest or the most watched female crypto YouTube channels globally, and we're not stopping anytime soon.
I love that. So obviously, there's a lot of outlets that you do work with. Which do you find most fulfilling? To be honest, I'm so much into loving myself these days. And the cool thing about it is I used to not love myself because of how I grew up, different things that I experienced. And having this YouTube channel now, because if you would have asked me like a million years ago when I was homeless or when I was going through any of my stuff, like, what are you going to do with your life? If you would have said, oh, you're going to be a YouTuber for a living, I'd be like, you're stupid, you're an idiot. Like, no, we're not doing this. Because I've gotten insecurities and stuff. But now I'm like embracing all this. And it's like so cool to have a voice. And I get to speak on things that are important to me. I get to speak on things that are important to specific communities. I get to speak on things that are impacting. I get to talk about how potentially crypto could fix this or Bitcoin can fix this, and why we need these tools, why privacy matters, why being self-sovereign matters, why the SEC is they're absolutely terrible, why these third-party entities are oppressive and how they're targeting different people. And I get to have my own voice and talk about what I want when I want, and nobody gets to tell me no. So just being able to have a voice and being able to feel empowered in that, and I know I'm making an impact on people. That's probably the coolest part is YouTube and TikTok too, because they need a lot of help over there. They do, that's for sure. Okay, we're gonna start on this side again with I can't speak today, with Hailey. How do you feel the crypto community could improve in regards to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, I always find this question a little interesting, just because one of the things that drew me as an attorney and as a woman into crypto is like that to me it feels very open to everybody. And when you look at like statistics about who's buying Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies more, or who's leading amazing trading things, maybe it's men more often than not, because of some of the other career paths that kind of feed into this space. But But for me, like, I mean, I created Crypto Connect, and it was really important that like gender not be like the topic of conversation really for me personally, because in my career as an attorney, like I've learned so much from men and women in the space. So I think just like, you know, coming into the space and knowing that it's for everybody, and that's really what Bitcoin was like in my mind. Like you said, level the playing field for everybody. Like that to me, it sort of like speaks for itself, the industry in that way. But I think, you know, I think hearing about each other's experiences really helps to like see different like career paths you could take in this space, or ways that you could get involved, or ways you could learn that speak to you. So that's what I would say.
Lauren, what is? Oh, can you guys hear me? Oh no.
I'm just muting so that we don't run into that anymore.
Oh, okay, awesome. Thank you. What does Web3 mean to you, and being a woman in Web3?
So I think, so by no means am I a Web3 expert. I don't think anybody is. And I'm not sure anybody has a definition of Web3 that's correct.
When was that even created? Like that term?
I'm not sure who created it, to be honest. So, you know, I guess I would say I think Web3 is more so a movement right now of, you know, shared ideas and values. And I could kind of touch on where I think it could be, you know, interesting and could be very helpful. You know, as a filmmaker, I think I see some really interesting projects going on in regards to film and how engaging community. I see some really cool projects where people are really figuring out how to have power within the community and the fans of people who love a project, where they're getting voting rights to pick what happens next in a film. I think that's really cool. Or in a TV series. I also see projects that are utilizing you know, just the ability to give more power back into the hands of the artist or the creator, you know. So we have Netflix, we have big studios, we have, you know, all these people that greenlight projects, but there's many decentralized streaming platforms being made. And you know, I can't say what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. I think there's plenty of ideas and movements or ideas within this movement of Web3 that probably won't work. But I think there are some really interesting projects that are really trying to figure out how to just give more power back to people and more ownership of their IP. So specifically in film, I think it's interesting. I can't really talk more on other areas of it, but yeah, I think there's some interesting concepts there.
So I actually wanted to add, so I, like a few days ago, was saying, I love this panel, I love this event, but I was like, I don't really even know what women in Web3, like what the message is that we're conveying. And I was like, I literally Googled, what is Web3? Like how do you just, like, how would you say that? And one thing that stood out to me is it said, you know, there's been two versions of the internet so far, like Web 1, which was just read, and Web 2, which is read and write. But the idea of Web 3, and it goes to what you're saying about film, is that Web 3 would be the ability to read, write, and own. And so in that way, it's like sort of another layer of like decentralization and ownership, direct ownership to things that are happening on the web and film, and these things that like people traditionally don't have like the feeling of ownership or like a connection to, which was, I just hadn't heard it said that way. So it was like,
I can add something to that too. I think, you know, as a first-time filmmaker, it's very hard to break into the film industry. So I think, you know, another idea with this Web3 movement is it's giving more opportunity where anybody can become a first-time filmmaker. And then really it's a meritocracy. If you have good work, if you put it out there and you spend the time and you build community, I think you have a great opportunity to get your project made. Or I've seen, you know, where people, they put their film on a platform and the fans vote. And if they can give money, they can do these different things, and the best projects get to go forward. And so I think, you know, it's this movement of where, you know, everybody has an equal opportunity to break into the industry. It's just, and I think that's really unique about it, maybe.
Yeah, I want to add also that I've noticed people, you know, within Web3, it goes back to what I said earlier, there's this inherent distrust in the institutions right now, in the big tech companies, right, who own all of the data. So I understand why people would want there to be a form of, you know, decentralization within some of these applications that are being built and these new, you know, this metaverse that people want to create. But I think that it needs to prove itself, really. I mean, in my opinion, Bitcoin has proven itself, and it's still very, very young, and it's still working to continue down that path. But Web3 really does need more time to see what these projects mean, because inherently we don't want any of them to become centralized, because that just repeats what the problem is right now. But I can understand why people would want more ownership of what they produce, what they create, what they put out into the world. And I think that, I've definitely seen an effort toward decentralization just in media within the internet, right? Like, the only reason that I'm able to have a job is because I'm able to monetize something that you couldn't before the internet. I can go on YouTube or create my own podcast by myself and somehow find an audience, and now suddenly I'm also a media entity, and I can compete with the likes of, big networks that once carried all the advertising dollars. And so I think that that's inspiring. I think that's what's, driving a lot of this movement, is a frustration, feeling like you want to, create and have ownership in that creation. And I'm just interested to see where it goes, because I'm very, skeptical, and I think we need more time.
I also want to just make a really quick comment on that. So when we talk about Web3 is about ownership, so we know that. But it's also about, and also before I talk about this, it's still in beta. And everything in crypto is pretty much still in beta. Even in Bitcoin is pretty much in beta, because Bitcoin was created for the people, by the people out of 2008, because horrible things happened to the middle class, to the lower middle class. So Bitcoin is really still proving itself, in my personal opinion. Is it going to be a hedge against inflation? Are we going to be able to use it as digital cash? Are we going to be able to, go back, read the white paper, Satoshi's white paper, and say, okay, does this work like this? So I think it's safe to say that we still need to give it some time. And most of the companies in Web3, a lot of them are startups. Most startups fail. Most entrepreneurs fail. And it's not because they're bad people. It's because being an entrepreneur is hard. You have to be able, it's like literally everybody on this panel is talented and beautiful, intelligent, and does really great things. But being an entrepreneur is being able to have all of these skills and bring it together as one person, and being able to run a business or whatever, or find people that can do all of these things to run a business successful with. So when we do talk about Web3, I just want to bring into consideration, there's so many predatory things that happen in the entertainment industry that we don't know about, we don't talk about. Selling licensing rights and merchandising rights and whatever different types of rights happens on the back end all the time. And the people that are actually out there creating or writing or speaking or playing music or entertaining, they're the ones that get burnt. People are really, we're tired, like with Bitcoin. A lot of Bitcoiners are tired of the banking industry. As somebody who's known musicians my whole entire life and seen them get absolutely wrecked and not being able to make it, not because they didn't have a following, because most of them were making music and creating before the internet, but for them to get turned down by these music agencies because they didn't look the right way, because they didn't talk the right way, because they didn't do something, they didn't want to sign over all of their rights. That's what Web3 is. It's about giving the power back to the people, just like Bitcoin gives the power back to the people to become self-sovereign.
Definitely. Does anybody else have anything to add? Great. Sorry, I think there we go. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna start off, I guess I ended last up with Natalie. So I'll head over to Wendy. How do you foster cohesion when interacting with an audience filled with differing beliefs and opinions on crypto and Bitcoin specifically?
So there's a lot of toxicity in the space, as most of you know, and that's okay. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. It's beautiful. And I actually learn when I have disruptive conversations with people about different ideas. Like, if you don't like what I do, tell me why you don't like it. I want to know why. How can I become a better person? So when I'm interacting with those people, I just take the same tactics I used to use in healthcare, because you have to remember, infectious disease, HIV/AIDS is something that we don't talk about a whole lot. It's a specific part of the healthcare industry that's kind of frowned upon. And there's a lot of predatory practices that happen there. So I would get clients from all different backgrounds that come in. Men, gay men, straight men, like you name it, they would come in, they'd want to get HIV tested, they want to get their medications, etc. So one of the biggest problems we had is they would be shunned kind of by their healthcare providers. They weren't being treated with respect. So they'd come to me because I was a low-level healthcare worker, and my job was to do patient retention. That basically means to keep the clients there. Well, it's super easy, especially if you have somebody that is living with an illness that they have to come back to you. And the way that you get them to keep coming back to you is by making them feel like a human being, by being personal with them. I knew my clients' names, their last names, their partners' names, their pets, their regiment. You name it, I knew that about them because I cared. I managed 200 to 300 patients a month. So when I'm talking to people with a difference of opinion, I have to make sure I'm taking a step back. I'm hearing what they have to say, but I'm also setting boundaries myself and being, okay, well, that's great about your opinion. I hear you. I understand that. I respect that, but this is my opinion. So I was actually able, like, even though I didn't make a whole lot of money in healthcare, I loved what I did with my clients. I took that same ideology as treating everybody as equal and hearing their side of the story and not being judgmental, because the moment you start judging another person without getting to know them, especially some stranger on the internet, you've lost at life. You've 100% lost at life, and you've blocked that blessing. And you don't want to do that. You want to get to know people, you want to talk to them and understand their point of view and understand their perspective, because that's how you grow as a human.
I mean, that needs an applause. It's
Yeah. It's also, like adding to that, I mean, it's one thing to go up to someone and disagree with them respectfully and have a nice conversation and maybe hear out why they disagree with you on something and have a constructive debate. It's another to sit behind your screen with an anonymous little photo and just blurt out really awful or judgmental or insulting things at a person you've never met. You don't know what their background is, why they say what they say. And we have so much of that online. And, it's difficult, but at the same time, I think a lot of us are probably getting more and more used to it, or we are used to it.
Sadly.
But it's, but you just, I think that, you're going to learn a lot if you sit down with someone, especially someone you disagree with, and meet them human to human and ask questions and learn from them. And I really do respect all the people in the space who try to poke holes in the arguments to try to, strengthen their conviction. And I wish that Twitter was a nicer place, but at the same time, I will defend your ability to say what you want, because I ultimately also believe in freedom of speech. So, you got to develop a thick skin if you're going to be putting stuff out there, which I think we are as well. But, think twice also if you're going to say something to someone. Maybe DM them instead, or maybe try to sit down with them if you can.
Yeah, we see a lot of trolls all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, Madison, you're going to come on stage before Q&A?
Yes. So we're going to do a little bit of a different Q&A this time. I'm going to stand right here, and I'm going to have you guys come up, and so you can kind of be a part of the experience and come chat with our panel. So if you don't mind coming up, and we'll start taking questions.
Yeah, we can just start lining up.
You up?
You can line up over here.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Matt McKeever, flew in from Omaha. So Nebraska says
Oh my
hi.
gosh! Oh, that's so
Lauren.
cool. Where in Omaha? Are you in? Where in Omaha?
I'm in Omaha. Oh,
Well, I mean,
I'm
West
in
Omaha?
Melbourne.
Oh,
Yeah, Western
oh,
Omaha.
that's where I'm
So,
from.
There you go.
Wow.
So, the
Small
Omaha
world.
Bitcoin meetup group sends
Yeah.
its best. So
Oh,
we
that's
do
so
you were
cool.
here. So,
Aw.
good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
I had a question for Hailey in particular, though. I have questions for all of you, of course. But a question for Hailey. You've worked at Silvergate, worked for Coinbase, and I'm curious about your perspectives on banking and crypto in the future, especially with Celsius failing as spectacularly as it did recently. What thoughts do you have about the banking industry and crypto?
It's a really good question, and especially for me, because I really am passionate about this. I mean, when I started at Silvergate, I was actually really shocked that there was such a fear among banks about crypto, and even just like banking a registered money services business that has all their money transmitter licenses and the New York Bit license, and it was still like a really big deal. And unfortunately, like I think some of the trends we're seeing in banking have to do with what administration's in control. When I was at Coinbase, I worked under Brian Brooks, who became the OCC, the head of the OCC, and did a lot of like some guidance about banks holding crypto, doing different things. So I think that when things like Celsius happens, and I've said this very publicly on Twitter, but like when companies fail and treat customers like shit and have put themselves out there as being better than banks, but then don't have to comply with any of the regulations that they would have needed to if they were a bank, it makes regulators seize up. Like, and I see it. I've like through the years I've been in the space, I've seen when regulators' guards are kind of down, when the market's going well, people are happy. It's almost like Twitter. I mean, like you see when people are more uptight and angry, and you see when they're like, okay, willing to listen and see like the promise. So it's a hard question, but like I think that it's part of the battle we have, is that the idea of Bitcoin is to be your own bank, right? And so like on its face, it sort of almost seems like it can't coexist with banking. But in some ways, banks are the perfect place for people who are not yet willing to quite be their own bank, to be willing to embrace supporting, you know, digital assets or Bitcoin in some way. And so I think we're far away from that, unfortunately. But I have hope that like we just will continue to find my hope is that Bitcoin will continue to seep into traditional finance and force them to pick up the speed, because like we were talking about, in other countries there's unbanked, there's bad banking system. In the US you can kind of rely on the banks, like 3 to 5 business days for a wire, these big, but like if we're like supposed to be the country of innovation, like banks should really have more I don't know, push to become better and stay competitive. And I would rather have a company unlike Celsius who's actually sort of held accountable in some way if people's funds are taken.
Thank you. I don't see anyone queued up. Can I ask one more quick question to all of them? Real
Yeah.
quick, and perhaps for Lauren in particular. Or maybe someone
Get in
else.
line, everyone.
Okay.
We're gonna be here all night.
And Lauren in particular, I've got an 11-year-old daughter growing up in West Omaha in Nebraska, but for all 4 of you, if you were 11 years old, what would you go back and tell yourself? And perhaps I might go back. My daughter might be watching too, so I'm curious about the 4 of you, what you could say if you go back in time and you were 11. Thank you, and I'll yield the microphone now.
That's tough. I mean, I guess I'll answer. Well, for me, I would say, you know, I was an athlete, so everything I focused on growing up was just sports. I mean, I thought I was going to go play in college and then professional the rest of my life, and I wasn't going to have any injuries or anything, you know. It was just, and so I think I was so focused just on that I didn't give myself a chance to really explore what else in life I enjoyed. And so I didn't find, you know, what I really loved until I'm 28 now. It took me a long time. So, you know, I don't think I really quite found that until 2019, and I'm still learning, and I'm still probably going to change my mind a lot. So I think just when you're 11, I think just explore everything, and I think you know, I went to the University of Nebraska first, so I stayed in Nebraska, and Nebraska is tiny. So yeah, I love the Huskers, but I think just get out and explore a bit. Go to college outside of Nebraska. I think that a big thing for me was traveling and learning other cultures and different states. Everything is so different. So yeah, I think just keep an open mind and explore everything, and just know that your mind will change. It will shift and it will change.
I would say take more chances and stop caring or thinking that other people are even thinking about you. Stop caring don't compare yourself. And I think today, I had the chance to become an adjunct at a university recently, and it was so sad to me how now that social media permeates young culture, how much they care about what other people think, how many likes they're getting. Like, stop all of that. You know, think for yourself and don't be afraid to go out on your own. Because I think also with my background, I was always afraid to go off on my own. I wanted to follow all the rules. I did the very traditional path, and like, Bitcoin has allowed me to break out of that and really be my full authentic self and not care anymore and take the risk and build the parachute on the way out of the plane. And it's really fulfilling and rewarding. Even if you fall flat on your face, you learn that way.
So I actually wasn't expecting this question, but thank you for asking it. My dad actually passed away on Christmas Eve when I was 11. So, and I also was heavily bullied at that time too. So I guess what I would say, and I don't want to go back and say I would change anything, because I made really terrible life choices up until I was like 22. Because if I didn't make all those terrible life choices, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, and I wouldn't have the peace that I have today. But I guess that I would just go back to my 11-year-old self and just remind me that you're going to be okay, things are going to work out, this is going to pass, and to have more confidence in yourself as who you are, because you do matter.
Amazing. Awesome.
I don't see a lot of people lining up, so I have a long question. I hope that's okay, but you probably heard about, I'll put it another way. If it's not okay, just someone tell me to stop, all right? It's a long question. Okay, you've all probably heard about BlackRock lately, partnering with Coinbase. And I had this thought, it's a speculation, but I think it's possible enough to take seriously that that BlackRock will try to come in and speed run and buy up 2 million, 3 million Bitcoin in 2 or 3 days. I think, just to run some numbers, BlackRock itself has 10 trillion under management, give or take. With the Aladdin platform, they have subscribers to, that's 40 trillion in assets under management globally. Merely 1% of that is $400 billion as of today, with the 2.3 million Bitcoin on exchange. At the current price, that's less than $60 billion. If they were to quickly come in and buy up with a bag of $400 billion, $800 billion, which is not much to them, what would that mean? Well, how possible is it? Because if it's going to happen, it'll happen when it's down close to the 200-week moving average, which it is now. If they wait, it gets harder to do. So I think it's more likely to happen sooner rather than later. There's more, but I think that's long enough.
It's honestly a really great question, and something that I think about too, because let's face it, when you have an asset that does have that has a finite supply, it can be possible to manipulate it. So it gets a little bit scary. I do know for a fact that the traditional banking system has been involved in crypto. They've been involved buying Bitcoin. It happens OTC. It's been happening forever. So could that happen? Yes. Is it going to happen? Possibly. But the big banks have already been here. It was a very strategic plan for Coinbase and BlackRock to partner together, because y'all know BlackRock, they want to buy all our houses and push us out and do all these other things. So it is a very big possibility, and it's something that we should be prepared for. It's something that you should consider. I love Bitcoin. I think it's fantastic, but at the same time, it is an investment, and it is a risky investment. And I think we should kind of indicate something like that in our trading or investing plan, because it's a risk.
Anybody else want to touch on it?
Who wants to be brave enough? No, just kidding.
I don't have an answer, because we're not privy to these conversations that are happening with some of these big banks and corporations. I always question, how much do big CEOs and some of these prominent figures within politics or Wall Street, how much do they actually know about Bitcoin? Because I truly believe that there's a difference between understanding it sort of on a surface level, the idea that it is decentralized, that it's a finite supply, but going down the rabbit hole is like a very endless experience, and the more that you learn about the history of money and how our economy works, and I just think not everyone has that depth of knowledge, because it takes so much time. And I think that our education system skews us toward a different economic theory that basically props up what the government is doing, and this statist idea that inflation is inherently good. And if you benefit from it, then why would you want to change the system, right? So I think on the one hand, we should be positive in the sense that it's inspiring to see some of these big names that maybe make some retail or institutional investors a little bit more comfortable about things like Bitcoin changing their mind publicly, right? Going from calling it like rat poison to all of a sudden being in on it. So that's a positive. But of course, because it's such a small still market, and it is very liquid, and there is manipulation, especially on the margins, there could be a big movement if a really big whale comes in, or another big company comes in. We saw that in the last year. Michael Saylor and Elon Musk. There is movement in that. Some people think that Elon Musk selling, not revealing until later with Tesla, might have been the reason that some of these companies actually finally unwound and had to resort to bankruptcy. So I think it's really, too early to tell. But I also think that's why it's important to get the message out to the average person. I don't care about these institutions like buying with their big, pockets and the politicians finally getting on board later. I care about the average person having a shot, and whether if you think that there's a 1% chance that Bitcoin will survive and make it, and that you'll be able to save for your future, then put 1% in. If you believe that's 5%, put 5% in. I think everyone's risk tolerance and how much they allocate is a very personal decision, and I'm a believer in free markets and free decision making when it comes to that. So I think too early to tell.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go to our next question. Amin.
First off, thanks for all you guys for coming in and being able to speak on your expertise on all your works. I actually just came back from Vancouver. I was actually helping to sponsor a summit up in Vancouver for female-led initiatives for women that are building in the Web3 space. I'm curious to learn, I'm just learning from a woman's perspective, what additional bridges do you see needing to be built right now that would enable more women to be building and be more active participants into Web3, crypto, Bitcoin, whatever initiative that you may see fit?
I kind of want to take this. Well, I want everyone else to answer too. But so, when I got into Bitcoin, there wasn't a whole lot of us there. There wasn't a whole lot of us, and I'm very loud, also, as most of you can tell. I say what's on my mind. But I don't think, like, obviously there's gender differences. Men do awesome things, women do awesome things, but also women's minds work a little bit differently than men, and that's okay. So I think if you're going to build an initiative that's going to be more focused to have women participate in the economy, build, or, you know, do anything in it, you have to really kind of figure out what suits their needs, what they're excited about, why, you know, and focus on that. You have to kind of get to know them or specific demographics. So I think that that's important to kind of take into play. But also, too, another thing that we don't really talk about enough, there is a big discrepancy between women in tech and, like, outside of crypto. And, you know, sometimes there's like inappropriate things that happen, and just the way that men do treat women at times. And I'm not knocking anybody in here. I'm just saying this is a known fact. Like, it is what it is. So I feel like we do need to be better at learning to be more accepting to other people and making it, and I hate the term safe space because it's stupid, but it is really stupid, but I like to think about creating an entity or creating something that is just like, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or you're this or you're that. There's a really great group of people that, you know, just showcase decency and showcase respect. So I think once you can start to focus on that, then I think that we'll be able to kind of draw more women in. But also, too, figure out what they like how can they be a part of, because women generally are better communicators than men, and that's okay. Or, just create a really great place that makes things comfortable, and maybe have rules as to what is proper etiquette and what isn't. I don't know if that's a good enough answer or not, though.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of answered the question a little when you asked. For me, like, things like this and Crypto Connect that like showcase women for what they've accomplished in the industry instead of showcasing women for like being, wow, you're one of 10 women in the room or something. Like I think that when like gender almost stops being the conversation, but like it's uncomfortable for anyone to walk into a room and not to see anybody that they can relate to in some way. And I'm not just talking like gender, race, like just to feel like you're the odd person out is not a good feeling. So my whole approach to like just diversity in general is to make it so no one walks into a room and feels like, wow, I like don't belong here. Like the idea of Bitcoin is like that literally everyone belongs and should be in the room. So I think if that's like in the back of everyone's mind, and for me, like if I see a man or a woman like at a meetup that like looks like they're new or like doesn't know people, I try to go out of my way, sometimes I feel shy, but I try to go out of my way to like make people feel welcome. So I think if we continue doing that and like making people know how excited we all are, like and just like if you have any questions like that, like just being able to have conversations to me is like what would make me feel more comfortable walking into a room of like any group of people. So
I was really surprised when I discovered how big the gender gap was within Bitcoin, because to me, like all of my girlfriends, they work super hard. Some of them make more money than their boyfriends or their partners, or they're trying to ascend to these high levels within their career, and they really care about the idea of saving and putting their money somewhere where they can plan for a future. And yet so many of them felt uncomfortable about Bitcoin and just investing in general, even stocks. And I saw a video once by Jordan Peterson, and this is a little, like in today's world, it's a little controversial. He basically said that there's a difference between male and female brains. Male brains tinker with things, like to fix things, and they're more apt to be involved in something like technology or science or engineering. Women's brains are more inclined towards things that are related to people and communication and social aspects. And so I think that the more, if you believe that or not, I don't know. I tend to see that in my own life, and I think you can look at these careers, finance, technology, science, engineering, mostly dominated by men. So maybe there's something to that, but I think that if you have events that make people feel welcome, if you have, someone that holds your hand down the rabbit hole, so to speak. You know, Alice was led down the rabbit hole. She didn't go by herself. And so I think that, you know, I like the idea of just feeling like there are other women and creating these social circles, because I think women are really nurturing and they do love to communicate and they like to make people feel welcome. And so I think it's natural for women to kind of, you know, create that sense of community that goes back to what Wendy said. I think community is really important, and the more that there is a sense of community, I think women will feel more comfortable.
Definitely. Yeah, when I came up with the name, it was a play on alliteration, but I love the conversation that it sparked tonight. It's been awesome. Great question.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, Paul, I think we're going to go 2 more questions, so these 2 in line.
Well, ladies, thanks so much for coming out. I love that you all come from very different backgrounds. You know, we got legal, sports, media, healthcare, and also seemingly got into Bitcoin and crypto at different times. Like Lauren, 2019, you said?
Yeah.
Hailey, I'm also class of 2013. I'd love to know, based on when you first got involved in Bitcoin and crypto, what surprises you most about where we are today? Because I know I would have never predicted what the industry is doing today back when I first got involved in 2013. And everything, DAOs, NFTs, all the different DeFi protocols and what we could do. So what would you say is the single thing that surprises you most relative when you got into crypto and where we are today?
That's such a hard question. It's a really good question. I mean, honestly, what popped into my head right away was, as an attorney, the relationship that like hardcore Bitcoiners and like different people have with regulation, I guess, is something like I think that I think that the debate of like, you know, Bitcoin only versus other tokens and the SEC and how they're regulating, like, I think the end goal in a way is still like, should be and is still like self-sovereignty and kind of keeping the government and regulations out, which is funny coming from a lawyer, I know. But yeah, I think like the industry has sort of like, I don't know how to say it, like is still grappling with like, what is our identity, right? Because now there's so many different people in the space that the way people like embrace or look at regulation or regulators getting involved is very different, and so that surprised me.
I can comment on this, but I don't want to give away too much about my film. So trying to figure out how to get around that. But, you know, I think for me, I guess there's the scale of it. So, you know, we've been filming outside of the US in other countries, and just seeing how some of these apps, you know, that are wallets for Bitcoin, and some of them are Bitcoin and Ethereum, but they're the #1 apps in their country. It's not Instagram, it's not TikTok, they're crypto wallets. And I think that's fascinating, that the adoption in some other countries is just, they're adopting it out of necessity. So I think back in 2019, I felt like I was so rare to stumble on Bitcoin and how many people know about this. And now I'm just seeing the scale of it. And I think that's really fascinating.
Honestly, I'm noticing the changes within myself via this space. And I don't know if anybody else feels that way. I feel like none of us can change Bitcoin, but Bitcoin changes you when you learn about it. Like, and I just like, I think back on myself when I first heard about it and the journey that you go on of just how I was so flippant about it, right? Like it was 2017, I was living up in Northern California. I had no clue what it was. I was like, well, it's digital, so obviously it could be hacked. What is this, like a tech stock? You know, well, all of my Silicon Valley friends are talking about it, so maybe this is like the next Uber or next Facebook or whatever. You know, I had no clue, and it was so humbling to go through the experience. Like, it changed me fundamentally. It changed my career. It changed how I view the future. I used to look at the future with a feeling of fear and feeling like there's no solution to all the problems. They're just gonna continue to get bigger and bigger, and we're gonna get more and more divided, and everyone's gonna look to, you know, this candidate that's gonna promise it, and then that's not gonna work out, so then they're just gonna go to the other team, and then that's not gonna work out. And I just like, I looked at the future and felt like, how am I gonna raise kids in this world? It's scary. And now, you know, we're still very early and we don't know what's gonna happen. We have so many obstacles ahead of us, but what an inspiring thought that we could actually create a new parallel system that is more inclusive, that is more fair, that provides so much hope, that provides hope all over the world. And like, I want to be on that mission. Like, I'll die on that hill. I would, because there's nothing more fulfilling than to fight for a world like that.
I think the coolest thing is just seeing how fast this industry is growing. And it's so exciting. Like, you look at all these other industries, you look at finance, or you look at tech, or, you know, we've had like the same smartphones for like the last 10 years, whatever. But like with crypto, with Bitcoin, with DeFi, we have got DeFi now, we have DAOs, we have NFTs. NFTs I'm the most excited about ever because they're not even built out yet. I don't think you guys understand how much power that actually gives back to the people. I'm not talking about the 10,000 generative projects, because those are more like, you know, altcoins. I'm talking about like the actual ownership and what smart contracts can do for people. And it just makes me so excited for the future. Like, my daughter's reality, she's 6, it's gonna be so much different than mine. And it's gonna provide so many tools for her to become, and other kids, to become these amazing individuals and to be able to create and do really cool stuff. And from when I got in 2017, it's becoming more easier and easier and easier to use different things in crypto. 'Cause I'm not tech savvy. If you have a tech question, you ask me. Wendy, how does smart contract work? I don't know. How does Bitcoin's code work? I don't know. I am not tech savvy, and I'm the first one to admit it. But things are becoming so much more easier to use, and that just makes me so excited for the underdogs, because they're the ones that need all of these technologies. And things are becoming more accessible to them to completely have ownership and to become self-sovereign, or to do whatever it is they want to do with it.
So I have a pretty general question in terms of, I guess, the crypto market as a whole. Maybe not today, but probably in maybe the distant future, not so much. But if you were to see basically the widespread adoption of cryptocurrencies, obviously there's so many. I mean, I don't know, who knows how many? There's 1,000, 2,000.
20,000.
Yeah, 20,000, right? So
20,000.
what would it really look like, in my opinion, where you have all of these assets or these coins in terms of like risk management? And that sounds like a weird question, but like, corporations have to manage risk for foreign exchange like exposure. If you're accepting so many currencies, I mean, anybody can take this question for that matter, but what would it really look like in terms of regulation or the ability for corporations to kind of manage that if they're accepting so many different currencies that are out there?
I know, all eyes on me.
All you, look at the lawyer ticket.
Regulatory expert.
No, I mean, I think it's a hard question just because I think we're far away from that. You know, so here's an example. My law firm accepts cryptocurrency through BitPay, but our accounting team's like, I don't want to touch any of that. Like, I don't want to deal with like some CPA at the end of the year all confused. My CPA hates me. I made jokes on it because I get tips on Twitter. I guess my point is that, you know, there's a lot of working parts in an organization to get all on board for risk management. So that's one layer of complexity to your question. And then the regulatory part is complicated. So I mean, for me personally, the reason I have always like had Hailey, Lennon, BTC in my Twitter handle is just for me, like, I feel like Bitcoin has had and continues to have the most regulatory clarity of all of them, which still isn't 100% regulatory clarity. We still have a ton of things to work out with various regulators. But so, you know, I think that if a company was really looking to like give themselves exposure, that's kind of it's not a great answer. If anyone has any thoughts, I actually would like, let's open up the floor. Who wants yeah, no, I mean, but I think that what we'll see is companies starting to do what they've done, which is embrace Bitcoin and dip their toe in it. And I think that, I mean, for me personally, that's usually what I tell people that are new to the industry is like, wrap your head around that. And then, you know, if you are interested in like learning other tokens and crypto, like go for it. So for me, I think that a company would start there. I don't know if any of you all have any thoughts on that. I mean, yeah, it's a hard question.
This is actually a really good question. It goes back to risk management, and this is even for retail investors. Like, with my portfolio, I'm consistently taking profit, like all the time. Like there's this thing called a moon bag, and that's when you put some money in, number goes up, you pull out your profit, you pull out your profit initial investment, you got a moon bag. If the thing goes to zero, oh, that sucks. But then if it goes to the moon, yay, you made some money. But also too, when we're looking at all these different altcoins, most of them are gonna go away. Entrepreneurs, small businesses. But at the same time, you also have to pay attention to the different utility. Like, what do these things do? What problem do they solve? Why do we need it? If it's a meme coin, probably you're not going to want to accept it. But if it's something that maybe has to do with an NFT project, or that's associated with a DAO, or that's associated with some sort of, I don't know, whatever it is, then you can probably, manage your risk a little bit differently with that. But again, it's going to go back to Hailey. What is a security? What isn't a security?
Yeah.
How, does this have utility? Like, it's really going to go back to the regulators, and we're going to need experts like Hailey to be like, what do we do with this stuff?
And if it's up to the SEC, they're going to say everything besides Bitcoin, and they're going to dance around Ethereum. Like, that's what the SEC is going to do, because they make money by regulating tokens. And so that's why I think the whole industry has been frustrated. Like, no matter what you're a fan of, what you invest in personally, it's just a mess. So that's why I think we're far away from that. Your question about like banking, there's just a lot of regulatory clarity we need. And I really hope that in like 10 years from now, I'm not on stage still saying the word regulatory clarity because I'm like a fucking like talking head repeating that over and over.
Who am I passing this
I
to?
don't know.
I just want to add one thing. I think sometimes we're judging the current system by the previous system that isn't working anymore. And we sometimes can't even imagine, I think, the ways in which this kind of new emerging ecosystem will transform the way that we save and invest. I think there will still be there's nothing wrong with securities. There will still be equity. There will be companies. People will still have real estate. But I think sometimes we ask those questions and we're framed in that way because our world and our manipulated money system has caused us to have to financialize and monetize everything. That's why we're a world of, or a country of essentially landlords and turning everyone into renters. That's why everyone's becoming day traders to try to make a profit on the stock market, because your money is easy, it's not hard, it's the supply is constantly expanding and you can't save, and that's why we really need this technology to fix some of those core problems. And so maybe that won't even necessarily be a question. And I agree with Wendy, it's very similar to the .com bubble, where a lot of these will fail. The entrepreneurs will have great valiant efforts and have good intentions, but they will ultimately fail. And I urge everybody to read an article that Jeff Booth just came out with. It's a little bit long. It goes very, very in depth. It's called Finding Signal Through the Noise. And he goes into, Bitcoin as well as crypto, Web3, DeFi, and this idea of you should start thinking about a pyramid. And that pyramid is decentralization, security, and scalability. And he talks about, where the obstacles are for also Bitcoin, but really with regards to the rest of the space, and why he believes that a lot of those projects will ultimately fail, and why Bitcoin is the best form of monetary technology that's ever been invented.